You know, when you think about ancient superpowers, one name always jumps to mind, right? Rome. But what if I told you that for centuries, Rome had an equal, a rival empire with incredible power and culture that for some reason we've kind of forgotten about in the West? Well, today we're diving into the story of that very empire, the Sasanians.
So let's just flip the script on history for a minute. What if the story of the ancient world wasn't just about Rome? What if there was another massive center of power, another eye of the earth, as one of its own kings would later call it?
Well, there was. For over 400 years, the Sasanian Empire of Persia, or Iran-Shar, the Empire of the Iranians, wasn't just some little kingdom on the border. We're talking about a full-blown superpower that went toe-to-toe with Rome, defeated it, and actually changed its rival in some really profound ways.
Okay, so how did this powerhouse even come to be? Well, it all kicks off with one empire falling apart and one man with a revolutionary vision to build something new and powerful in its place.
So picture this. It's the early 2000s, and the Parthian Empire, which had been running things in Iran for centuries, is basically on its last legs. It's weak, it's decentralized, and a local Persian ruler, a guy named Ardashir I, sees a massive opportunity. In 224, he just smashes the last Parthian king in a decisive battle. And 2 years later, he crowns himself Shahanshah, King of Kings. That title alone was a huge statement. A new, incredibly ambitious dynasty was now in charge.
And this quote right here, this is basically the mission statement for the entire empire. Ardashir's big, game-changing idea was to tie the power of the government directly to the Zoroastrian religion. This created a super strong national identity and gave him a divine right to rule that the old Parthian kings just never had.
So if Ardashir lit the match, his son Shapur I was the one who turned the Sasanian state into a roaring bonfire on the world stage. His ambition wasn't just regional, it was global. He took the fight straight to the Romans, and he was so successful that he earned an even bigger title, King of Kings of Iranians and non-Iranians. He was making it clear he was coming for everyone.
And his success was, well, it was just staggering. For the Roman Empire, this was an absolute nightmare. Shapur didn't just beat one Roman emperor, or two. He defeated 3 of them in a row. He killed Gordian III in battle, forced Philip the Arab to literally beg for peace. And then, in the year 260, he did the unthinkable.
And the humiliation wasn't just on the battlefield. After one of his victories, Shapur forced the next emperor, Philip, to pay a ransom that was just mind-boggling, 500,000 gold coins, just to let the Roman army go home. This was a massive blow to Rome's wallet, and an even bigger blow to its pride.
But nothing, and I mean nothing, compares to the capture of Emperor Valerian. This was a shock to the entire ancient world. For the very first time, a Roman emperor was taken prisoner in battle. Roman historians told these horror stories that Shapur used him as a human footstool. But even the reality was a huge win for Persia. Shapur deported thousands of Roman prisoners, including their best engineers, and put them to work building amazing new cities and infrastructure all across his own empire.
But look, no empire's story is just a straight line of victories. Every great power faces a crisis. And by the 5th century, the Sasanian state found itself in a fight for its life, battling huge threats from the outside and from within.
They were getting squeezed from 2 sides at once. Out on their eastern border, this powerful nomadic group, the Hephthalite Huns, became a genuine existential threat. And at the exact same time, back home, a radical religious and social movement called Mazdakism just exploded, threatening to tear the whole society apart.
The threat from the east came to a head in 484. The Sasanian king, Peroz I, led his army straight into a Hephthalite ambush. And it wasn't just a defeat, it was a total annihilation. The king was killed, the army was wiped out, and the Sasanians were forced to pay a massive tribute every single year. The government basically collapsed, leading to chaos and crisis.
And right in the middle of all that chaos, the internal threat blew up. A priest named Mazdak starts preaching this really revolutionary idea that all wealth, all property, even the women kept in noble harems, should be shared equally by everyone. It was this radical call for social justice that really caught on with the poor and desperate people of the empire.
But you know how it is, sometimes out of the absolute worst moments, the greatest leaders emerge. And from the ashes of this crisis came the empire's greatest ruler and its undisputed golden age. This was the time of Khosrow I, a king so revered they called him the Immortal Soul.
When Khosrow took the throne, he was basically inheriting a sinking ship. The treasury was bone dry from paying tribute, the big-shot nobles were doing whatever they wanted, the tax system was a mess, and the army was totally unreliable. The empire was teetering on the edge of total collapse.
But Khosrow didn't just slap a few band-aids on the problems. He rebuilt the entire state from the ground up. He created a new fixed tax system, which for the first time gave the government a steady, predictable income. With that money, he created a brand new professional army that was loyal only to him, not to the nobles. And then he empowered a whole new class of local administrators, called the decans, to run things, completely sidelining the old, powerful families. It was genius.
And get this, he wasn't just some bean counter or military guy, he was a true philosopher king. He founded the legendary Academy of Gondishapur, which became maybe the most important center for learning in the entire world. He welcomed scholars from all over, creating this amazing melting pot where Greek, Indian, and Persian ideas about medicine, science, and philosophy all came together and flourished.
So the empire is at its absolute peak. It's bigger, richer, and stronger than it has ever been before. And you know what that usually means in history, right? The moment of greatest triumph often comes right before a sudden, spectacular fall. And the man at the center of this collapse? Khosrow II. He launches the last and greatest war against Rome, which by now we call the Byzantine Empire. And at first he's incredibly successful. But his own pride, his hubris, was his downfall. He became obsessed with completely wiping out his rival, refusing any chance for peace, and he just stretched his empire to the breaking point.
And the reversal of fortune is just whiplash-inducing. One minute, the Sasanians are capturing Jerusalem, they're at the very walls of Constantinople, it looks like it's all over. But then, the Byzantine Emperor Heraclius launches this unbelievably daring counterattack deep into Persian territory and scores a major victory. The nobles in Persia had had enough of the endless wars, so they turned on Khosrow and had him executed.
What happened next was a perfect storm. Seriously, everything that could go wrong did go wrong, all at once. The empire was completely broke and out of soldiers. A vicious civil war broke out, with a dozen different people claiming the throne in just 4 years. A horrible plague swept through. And right at this moment of total weakness, a new, unified, and highly motivated force came storming out of the Arabian Peninsula, the armies of Islam. And just like that, in a few short years, the Sasanian state was gone. Conquered, wiped off the map. But here's the crazy part. While the empire itself died, its culture, its ideas, they were a lot harder to kill. In fact, in a lot of ways, the Sasanians would end up conquering their conquerors. I mean, look at this. The Arab conquerors were brilliant on the battlefield, but they didn't really have a blueprint for how to run a giant, complex empire. So what did they do? They basically just copied the Sasanian homework. They adopted their entire system of bureaucracy, their administration, even their fancy court rituals. The famous Islamic Golden Age that followed was, in many ways, built on a Sasanian foundation.
And this all brings us back to today, because this isn't just stuff for the history books. The culture, the language, the identity that was created under the Sasanians has shaped Iran for 1,400 years. And that leaves us with a pretty big question. When we look at the world today, at the complex geopolitics of the Middle East, are we maybe seeing modern echoes of that ancient 400-year rivalry between the power in Iran and the powers in the West?